I suppose, to speak at the launch. I think there's a Melbourne one as well, but weirdly, although I'm from Melbourne, I could get to the Sydney one, so here we are. Thank you for that introduction. I'm not sure about the Beyonce thing. Look, it's after 5. If I was ever going to do drag, which is not particularly my thing, I'd probably choose a sari, because I saw the most beautiful exhibition of saris in Melbourne. The political history of saris, the textile, and it's really quite captivating. So it is coming to Sydney later this year, the Powerhouse Museum. And when you see it advertised, go see it. This is part of modern Australia, and I also acknowledge, as we gather to mark the advent of the association that's so critical to this part of our modern Australian community, international education, I also acknowledge the traditional owners, as you did, Ben. Thank you for hosting us here. Thanks to Toshi for your leadership over a long time in New South Wales. Ian Ed, I think I started my day in Sydney when I got off the plane, so I'm bookending the day with you again. Hello, wherever you are. But to you, Rob, and also Gary, through you, Jennifer, thanks for your leadership in actually getting to the point of bringing two associations together. I'll try not to talk for 15 minutes since the running sheet had, because no one wants that, but I will make a few points. International education, many of you have heard me talk before, and I won't go over the sort of evangelical love that I've had over many years for the sector, but it is a great Australian success story. Success, though, will rely on a ruthless focus on quality and a great student experience. And the international agent network are critical intermediaries in this. There is a social license issue in the sector, that's the truth of it. And it's not the people in this room that are creating that social license issue, but it's real and it's still ongoing, and there's more work to do that the government's not going to back off from. But I do welcome the association, because consumers inherently, mostly young people, mostly from a different country that most of them are not onshore, they have an enormous information asymmetry, and agents properly done, and including agents onshore who are helping them take the next step, if that's moving on for an appropriate qualification, agents have a critical role in bridging that information asymmetry and also dealing with young people who are in that sense vulnerable consumers. Overwhelmingly, the obligation that you have, according to the ESOS code, to your own ethics and codes of practice, is to try and match that young person with the right course that's right for their future. And I know through many years of dealing with the reputable agents, that is what we do, what we said to do. Can't always save young people from some choices that parents might be foisting on them. They figure that out themselves. So that, many people in my multicultural community, there are more than 4 things you can be. You don't have to be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, an engineer. There are other things out there. But the work that you do in guiding people and helping them figure out what's right for their future really matters. The truth is also, as you know, and thanks for the tip-offs, that some agent behaviour is not in the interests of consumers. They're acting in their own financial self-interest, not just because of commissions, but other kickbacks and so on, and are buggering up the market. Some of you would have heard me talk before, and I get that it's not popular. With some it is, with some it isn't, but the government's position has been to wipe out onshore commissions for transfers, not for new commencements, but for transfers. And that's frankly because the agents, the intermediaries, were corrupting the market to the extent that it was really hitting the quality of education. As a society, we've seen this in other sectors before, the Banking Royal Commission and mortgage brokers and financial advisors back when, 1980s, it was scandals about pharmaceutical drug company reps with kickbacks to doctors and so on. So there is a role for regulation, and at every point in history, governments do step in when they see intermediaries buggering up a market and put some order in it, and that's what we're seeking to do. This was pointed out in great detail in the Nixon Review, which revealed criminal misuse of the student visa system, including by education agents, migration agents and others, for human trafficking and work scams and so on, and shocking exploitation. That's at the bad end, and that was one of the things that underpinned the legislation which has now come into effect, I think 1st of April this month, around the onshore commission ban. We're looking at the timing and best use of the power also around collection of data on commission payments. I'm very old-fashioned. I think you should make public policy based on evidence, not the vibe of the thing, and many people are suggesting other things you could or should do, commission transparency, whatever else. Let's just not get ahead of ourselves. We need to get the data and understand what's happening in the market to decide if and when there should be other interventions. So just put that out there. There are examples of questionable behaviour that I've seen in the last few weeks, and and a number of people have sent me WhatsApp's fine, YouTube links and things that the less reputable agents and providers are already doing, giving students cashback, kickbacks and all that kind of stuff. If you see them, please report them in. I've already referred some to the regulators and I'll continue to do so, and I reserve the right, if we need to make further adjustments to the code if there's loopholes that are really obvious, because we're not going to put up with those kind of practices. We saw that some years ago in a different context with iPads and cashbacks for students in the vet student market, and we wiped it out. It's not in the interest of students. So, please, eyes and ears, very welcome. I'll just finish with a couple of points. Firstly, to give you a little bit of context about where the government's head's at on the sector generally, and secondly, I was just talking before, and I'll just make a couple of remarks because a few people said it might be of interest around some of the visa settings at the moment. So, overwhelmingly, my focus is on how to get more value for Australia from international education. I think that's a really useful policy frame, but it's also a very useful frame to talk to Australians, given those social licence issues that I touched on earlier. Because inherent in the phrase getting more value for Australia is the presumption and the assertion that this sector and the work that you do and the lives that you change is of value to Australia. I fully understand, won't go through it all, that ultimately it's also of value to the young person to have a premium education, whether they stay in Australia or whether they return to their home country. There's the intangibles of soft power, of contribution to skills, of research, taking that bit of Australia home with them, and the value of internationalisation of the Australian student experience in classrooms across the country. I was in Hobart last week and went to Hobart College. They still run the Year 11 and 12 model in Hobart, and they talked powerfully about the enormous impact that the 160 or so international students out of their cohort of 1,500 students at the college have on the Tasmanian students. Tasmania overwhelmingly is the least culturally diverse state, lowest proportion of people born overseas, and the research is really clear that having international students in the classroom, that internationalisation benefit, cross-cultural communication, makes Aussie kids more creative, more cross-cultural, more open to ideas, more open to learning, and they get better results. So really powerful benefits. But in terms of where we are, I don't think anyone should expect at the moment, when we look around the world, when we look around the troubles that are facing every country on earth with a global fuel shock that we haven't seen from the 1970s and that extent of potential economic disruption. The Treasurer was pretty frank about it when he came back from the IMF on Monday. I don't think anyone should be expecting significant or further increases in the number of students coming to Australia, at least at this time in the near future. In the medium term to longer term, I think we can be optimistic though, and getting more value for Australia doesn't mean ever more students coming onshore. We've had this discussion. It means more students at higher levels. It can mean market diversification to increase soft power and improve the experience of students in Australian classrooms, as well as alignment perhaps in some parts of the sector with future skills needs of Australia as well as things which are probably outside a lot of your focus, but transnational delivery and international research links. We want to see over time, just as the UK has, the percentage of students, the number of students rise, and the percentage of students studying in an Australian educational qualification offshore also rise. Ours is relatively low. We can do a lot more and a lot better across Southeast Asia and South Asia, and in particular with our partners and neighbours. So I'll just kind of leave you with that sense. There are, tough times about and pretty tough decisions right through, as you saw the NDIS reform as Australians yesterday. This is a pretty tough time globally. We're doing our best to shield Australia and Australians from the worst of this global crisis, and we'll continue to do so. The final thing I'll just say on visas, the visa rejection rates from South Asia have been up. Can I just dispel the conspiracy theory, which the Financial Review has decided to run a couple of times? Visa rejection rates have no correlation with the national planning level. I can't do that by law. The department can't do that by law. The conspiracy theories running that visa rejection rates are somehow a way of managing numbers are complete nonsense. It's a media narrative. I'm glad some of you are sitting down. You'll be shocked to know not everything you read in the newspapers is true. There you go. What we are seeing, And some of it was a weaponisation of the change to evidence levels last September in parts of South Asia. It was kind of a perfect storm of factors. At the same time that a lot of our competitor and peer countries tighten their settings or were perceived to become far less welcoming, in the case of one large country up there, we changed some evidence levels because integrity had improved, and that was immediately weaponised in those markets on social media by the agent network, with that huge cultural and economic pressure for outbound migration at the lower levels of society. Unfortunately, that led to a spike in applications. Those who've been around the sector for 10 years or more would know we've seen this movie before, and we don't want to watch the rerun. So I was very clear with the department as we saw those numbers jump, almost double in Nepal, for instance. We went in and did large-scale sampling to figure out what was going on. There has been no change to policy settings per se, but there's a couple of things to bear in mind. Some of it you probably can do better on in applications and guiding students, working with migration agents and so on. Others are really difficult for you to pick up. In parts of South Asia, the advent of AI is generating ridiculously sophisticated levels of fraud in financial documents that Home Affairs can pick up from the back end, but can't always be detected. I've seen some of the stuff when I was in Delhi with the team in December, and it's kind of hair-raising. In other parts, I'll give Nepal as an example, most students, not all, but most from some of those markets, finance their study through loans. Fair enough. Today, previously, maybe 6-12 months ago, the department would pay great attention to the veracity of the loan. Is the money real in the bank account? Is this a genuine loan? Check, tick, looks reasonable, more likely to get a visa. What we started to do as we saw the spike as well was have a real look at, okay, as the regulations allow, they haven't changed, as the genuine student entry test and requirements haven't changed. Actually have a look at, okay, so what's your capacity to repay this loan? How are you going to repay this loan? What's your claimed family income? What's the actual value of the asset that you're saying you secure the loan about? And unfortunately, what the department's found in many cases is the asset values are curiously a lot higher than the asset values of anything much around in that part of Nepal, or the family income puts them curiously in the top 1 or 2%. It's just not credible. So I really encourage you in some of those markets to pay greater attention, not just to the first 12 months, but what's the actual capacity of a student to repay the loan on which the application is resting. That's a significant driver. There's other issues as well. I appreciate also the feedback. All feedback's a gift. I say that to my staff. I appreciate the feedback that there's room for improvement, to put it in the positive, for some of the reasons for decision. The department is not resourced and never will be resourced to give you very detailed reasons for decision on student visa applications. But they have taken on board the feedback of some of the errors or cut and paste and so on, and they're doing some work at the moment to try and improve things so that you get clearer clues about what the issue was, because I get that people in this room and good providers want to understand what the issue was for improvement. You don't want to put forward students who will be rejected. So I just leave you with that. I have said to the department it's probably time to have a bit of a fresh look at MD 106. So we don't consult on ministerial directions. That would be not right. But if people have particular issues or frustrations, now's a good time via the peak bodies just to feed them in, because we're all ears on what we could do. We want clarity to the greatest extent that we can. We want the ART also to have clarity to the greatest extent we can. So I'll finish on that. I acknowledge also your advocacy from the association in various submissions around agent registration and so on, to put people who choose to be the members of a proper professional association on a good footing. We're not closed to that. What I would say is, within government, a properly run government, as I do believe we can claim to be, we have a cabinet process, people pour over stuff, departments that put stuff through old-fashioned. It's the Westminster system, part of our British inheritance, and a system of government that I think has served us well. If we put forward models of agent regulation, it'll have to be at the lowest cost to the economy, because you're going to pay for it. Taxpayers not going to front up and pay for an agent regulatory. It'll be a regulatory cost recovery. So I'm very interested in an ongoing dialogue as to what the least cost, most effective way of dealing with the issue that many of you, that Rob's been chewing my ear about for some time, have raised, and will continue talking. So don't have any announcements, haven't got a firm view, but we have committed to have a look at that as part of the response to the Nixon review and also the advocacy that you put forward. So thank you very much. If there was a ribbon to cut, I would cut it now, but consider yourself launched if that's what I'm supposed to do. But I really look forward to the ongoing dialogue. Thank you very much.